I bypassed the chain of command, huh? That's what the laminated poster said. Taped in the goddamn break room, next to the fire extinguisher and some passive-aggressive memo about refilling the Keurig. My alleged crime, displayed like some cautionary tale from a dystopian HR playbook. But let me rewind 48 hours, back when I was still Amanda Fields, senior project coordinator, corporate problem solver, an official fixer of everything Megan I'm a visionary not a doer ignored. We just onboarded a mammoth new client, big pharma adjacent, with money thicker than their compliance checklists. Their general counsel was infamous. Cross every T or you'd find your inbox subpoenaed by breakfast. Megan, my director, had promptly done what she always did in the face of responsibility: vanish into a whirlpool of strategic prioritization and meaningless Slack statuses. Her calendar was a game of Minesweeper. Open any square and risk stepping into a client alignment session or deck polishing. Meanwhile, the actual work fell again to me. I'd been handling most of the comms with their implementation team anyway. They trusted me. They CC'd me. Hell, they even scheduled their update calls around my time zone. So when their GC sent over a simple clarification, "Can you confirm if that renewal pricing includes regional compliance modules?" I didn't wait. I didn't slack Megan. I didn't circle back. I just answered. Promptly, clearly, like a grown woman who knew how to read a contract and respond like an adult, because that's what I do. I solve things. Side note before we keep going, real quick. If you're into these kinds of corporate circus meets poetic justice stories, do me a solid, hit that little subscribe button and maybe even throw in a like. Seriously, 90% of folks listen without subscribing, and it'd mean the world to the team putting these together. Helps us keep digging up the good stuff. Anyway, where were we? Oh right, my reply. It was barely 3 sentences long. Confirmed the modules were included a cross-reference to our internal documentation, even added a pleasant let me know if there's anything else you need. Copy-paste it into a textbook and call it a masterclass in client correspondence. I didn't even think twice. Why would I? The deadline for final quote approval was looming, and Megan had been refining tone on her response draft for 4 days, translation, staring at her screen while updating LinkedIn keywords. I sent the email around 4:52 p.m. By 5:15, client had replied with a "Thanks, Amanda. This clears it up. End of story, right? Problem solved, client happy, internal fires avoided. You'd think I'd earn a gold star and a stress ball shaped like a champagne bottle, but nah. The next morning, I was called into HR like a high schooler who got caught vaping in the gym. Karen from HR, yes, that's her actual name, I swear to God, looked like she'd been practicing this little performance in the mirror. Amanda, it's been brought to our attention that you engaged in unauthorized client communication, specifically bypassing your chain of command regarding client F. I blinked. You mean the pricing clarification? Yes, she nodded, lips pursed like she just sucked on a lemon dipped in betrayal. Per your director, Megan, you responded without leadership alignment. I opened my mouth, closed it, because what was I supposed to say? I prevented a multi-million-dollar account from going cold because my boss was too busy rotating fonts on a pitch deck? Effective immediately, Karen continued, pushing a single sheet across the table like it was laced with arsenic. Your employment is terminated. You will not receive severance. Your PTO payout will be delayed pending equipment return. There was no write-up, no paper trail, no investigation. Just gone. Like I'd posted nudes on the company Slack or stapled a raccoon to someone's standing desk. And here's the kicker, the laminated poster. Already printed, already posted. I passed it on my way out. My photo blurred, but not that blurred. The words, violated communication protocols terminated. It was personal. Megan made sure of it. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't demand to speak to the CEO or trash my badge in some Jerry Maguire meltdown. I just grabbed my laptop bag, nodded at the front desk like nothing was wrong, and walked out into the parking lot. The sun hit different that day, harder. Like it knew I'd just been fed to the wolves for doing my job too well. But here's the thing about wolves. Sometimes the quiet ones are just waiting, watching, smiling with all their teeth. The morning after that email, I woke up thinking about breakfast burritos and inbox zero. I didn't know yet that my entire professional identity was about to be folded into a laminated HR morality tale. The company Slack was quiet, too quiet. Not the usual chaos of emojis and coffee memes, just static. Then, at 9:07 a.m. sharp, my team's calendar flashed a meeting invite, urgent HR discussion, mandatory attendance. 30 minutes from now. No subject line, no context. I'd seen enough horror movies to know when not to ask questions. When I walked into the HR conference room, Megan was already there, arms crossed, nails French-tipped and twitching. She didn't make eye contact, just stared at her phone like she was waiting for applause. Across the table sat Karen from HR, looking like someone about to read a eulogy she'd written herself. Amanda, Karen began, her tone syrupy and smug. You've reviewed your recent activity regarding client F. It appears you bypassed the leadership chain and made unilateral communication decisions. I frowned. Unilateral? I answered an email. Megan finally looked up. You went rogue, she said, each word clipped like a pair of office scissors. We have protocols for a reason. Protocols? I repeated, incredulous. The client asked for pricing clarification. You were unavailable. I was preparing strategic messaging. She snapped, her nostrils flaring like a bull who discovered PowerPoint. You undermined leadership. I glanced between them. Karen already had the paperwork ready, 2 copies, neatly stapled, with a company-branded pen laid across the top like a ceremonial dagger. Effective immediately, she said. Your employment is terminated, that's it. No warnings, no prior discussions. No hey, maybe next time loop us in. Just fired on a Thursday, before lunch. I stared at the document, scanning the words through a fog. No severance, I asked. Karen shook her head. You violated policy. And no exit meeting, she added. Security will escort you out after you collect your belongings. It was strange how calm everything felt, like watching a train crash through a snow globe. I'd expected tears, panic, something cinematic. Instead, all I could hear was the clock ticking behind her. Every second a reminder of how cheap loyalty was, how fast competence turned into a liability. When I walked back to my desk, the office felt radioactive. Everyone knew, you can always tell. People pretend to type faster, pretend to be busy. 1 or 2 dared to glance up as I passed. Someone coughed. My monitor was already logged out, the corporate equivalent of a body bag. I dropped my badge on my keyboard, unplugged my charger, and stuffed my coffee mug into my tote. The mug said, "Not today, Satan." Irony's cruel like that. As I walked toward the exit, I saw it, the break room poster. Freshly laminated, hung perfectly straight like HR had called in facilities for precision framing. My photo, blurred but recognizable. Captioned, "Fired for violating communication protocols." The kicker, a motivational subtext in italics beneath it. Integrity starts with following the process. I actually laughed, out loud, a sharp, single exhale that startled the intern microwaving leftover sushi. Megan's fingerprints were all over it. Her brand of punishment wasn't content with silence, it had to humiliate. Out in the parking lot, the wind smelled like printer toner and fake lemon from the janitorial carts. I stood there, bag over my shoulder, watching the automatic doors hiss shut behind me. My entire career reduced to a poster and a bullet point on someone's lessons learned slide deck. But anger didn't come yet, not real anger, just static. Like my body was buffering the emotion, waiting for a stronger signal. I got into my car, stared at the steering wheel, and thought, so this is what it feels like to be erased in broad daylight. No HR exit interview, no handshake, no dignity, just deleted. I turned the key. The radio came on mid-commercial, some cheery voice talking about mattress sales and fresh starts. I almost laughed again. What I didn't know then was that my fresh start was already in motion, just not in the way HR or Megan thought. Because the email I'd sent, the one that got me fired, was still echoing somewhere it shouldn't, and someone important had just noticed. The silence in the building was replaced by a different kind of silence online, digital, deliberate, and just as suffocating. My Slack account was deactivated before I even hit the parking lot, but I knew what was happening behind the firewall. I didn't need access to feel the weight of the sudden void I'd left. You can always tell when the company hive mind shifts. It's in the changed profile pictures, the way channels go eerily quiet, the flurry of side DMs disguised as Happy Thursday or Team Lunch. The whispers didn't start with my name. They started with Megan's Slack post, dropped into the main client success thread like a turd in the punch bowl. As we reflect on the importance of process integrity, we are reminded that teamwork starts with aligned communication. Let's recommit to doing things the right way together. No name, no context. Just a vague sermon designed to imply wrongdoing without inviting questions. Classic Megan, passive-aggressive meets executive-approved sanctimony. I could practically hear her clicking send while sipping a matcha latte and pretending to work. A few brave coworkers reacted with the emoji, a silent salute. Others chose the eyes emoji, eyes, the corporate equivalent of wait, what the hell just happened? But most didn't react at all, not publicly. Some of them had families, some had mortgages. No one wants to be caught sympathizing with the recently exiled. By late afternoon, I was home in my kitchen, staring into the void of my now pointless Outlook calendar. I kept expecting to get angry, to cry, but nothing came, just numb acceptance with a faint undertone of this doesn't add up. I kept replaying that last email in my head, the one I'd sent that sparked this whole damn circus. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't reckless. It was factual, courteous, and by the book. If anything, it was boring. Which is why what happened next almost made me drop my wine glass. Message pinged on my phone. LinkedIn. From someone I didn't recognize immediately, one of the legal associates from Client F. Not their main GC, but close, high enough on the ladder to make my eyebrows twitch. The message was short, surgical. "Hi Amanda, just confirming that pricing clarification you sent yesterday, was that your final email to us?" I stared at it, read it twice. Then typed, "Yes, sent 4:52 p.m. Got your reply 5:15. Seconds later, 3 dots appeared, then, "Thought so. Please don't delete it, no explanation, no follow-up, just those 6 words. I set my phone down and just sat there. My stomach turned, not from fear, but from curiosity. That cold little ember of intrigue lighting up behind my ribs. Don't delete it, why? What exactly was in that email that had them double-checking timestamps like they were building a case? I pulled the message back up and reread it. It was textbook client service. Nothing flashy. Just a confirmation that the compliance modules were bundled into the renewal pricing. I had even included the link to the documentation and said let me know if anything else is unclear, like always. The same format I'd used 100 times before. But maybe that was the point. Maybe this wasn't about the email being wrong. Maybe it was about it being right. And maybe someone up the food chain didn't like how right it was. I started Googling, looking up old press releases, skimming through archived newsletters, trying to piece together the puzzle that was client FTCAS onboarding history. I found a few articles about their prior contract cycle, buried between jargon-heavy reports and awkward CEO selfies. Nothing screamed smoking gun, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd nudged a landmine someone forgot was still active. Then I remembered something strange from onboarding. A story the founder, back before he stepped down, had told during our training week. He mentioned Client F by name, said they were a long-term partner with teeth, warned us never to let their legal team feel neglected. One missed reply and they'll chew straight through the C-suite, he joked. Everyone laughed. I didn't. And now, memory landed different. I poured another glass of wine and opened my inbox. My company credentials were gone, but I still had the sent copy of that email saved in my personal drafts folder. I read it again, word for word, trying to see what they saw. Every sentence now carried the weight of something. I just didn't know what yet. That night, I didn't sleep much, not out of stress, but because my brain wouldn't shut off. A quiet storm had started, and I wasn't sure if I'd triggered it or just been standing in the right place when someone else's fault line gave out. All I knew was this: something about my firing felt too clean, too fast, like someone trying to slam a door before a draft exposed what was underneath. And if the client's legal team was watching closely, then I wasn't the only one who smelled smoke. By Friday, Megan had fully transitioned from petty tyrant to triumphant martyr. The narrative had been sculpted with surgical precision. Amanda went rogue, endangered a high-value client, and leadership had no choice but to act decisively. She even started walking through the halls with that cloying air of self-importance, like someone who just watched Succession and misunderstood who the villain was. Sometimes you have to make the hard calls, she told someone loud enough to be overheard near the break room. Process matters more than personalities. Can't reward chaos. Process. That word was becoming a cult chant around the office, echoed in team stand-ups, Slack messages, even in the new header on the internal dashboard. Communication discipline equals company integrity. Like I was the contagion and they were bleaching the walls. Word spread quickly that Megan was being considered for a formal promotion. Not just a title bump, an actual director position. Apparently, taking swift action during a client crisis had earned her some high-level nods. I imagine she updated her resume with the word decisive at least 3 times that day. And then came the kicker. The CEO scheduled an all-hands, mandatory attendance. Title, reaffirming client confidence through communication clarity. You could practically hear the PR firm that ghostwrote it. I should have been angry. But instead, I felt still. Not peace, not closure. Just the quiet that comes before a damn gives. Because while Megan was doing her little victory lap, I was staring at an email that hit my personal inbox at 10:12 a.m. The sender wasn't familiar. The signature block read, Philip Greer, Partner Legacy Holdings and Transitional Counsel, on behalf of the Carter Trust, the Carter Trust. As in Gregory Carter, the founder, the man who built the company from a garage in Tampa, turned it into a Saw-esque juggernaut, and stepped down 3 years ago under mysterious health and family terms. Most people assumed he'd cashed out and disappeared into some vineyard with internet access. But the trust? I'd forgotten it even existed. The email was short, formal, but not robotic. Miss Fields, you may be aware of recent developments regarding your termination. We have reason to believe your recent correspondence with Client F has activated a clause of significance. Please do not delete any communication records. You are requested to attend the upcoming company all-hands meeting scheduled for Monday. You will be present as a guest observer listed under Legacy Holdings Compliance Review Authority. Please do not speak unless explicitly prompted. Warm regards, Philip Greer, Transitional Counsel. I reread it 5 times. Not because it was unclear, but because it was too clear. Cold, precise. The kind of email you send when the chessboard is already in motion and you're just waiting for someone to notice the missing queen. A clause of significance? I opened my laptop and scanned the old internal policies. Nothing. Then I searched my files from the original client onboarding sessions. There it was, a dusty slide deck from 3 years ago when Client F re-upped their contract. One line caught my eye, buried in the notes section. In the event of operational breakdown or executive obstruction, account reversion may be triggered via Foundational Clause 47A. Clause 47A. At the time, no one had paid much attention. We'd all assumed reversion was legal jargon for shifting liaison points. But now, After what happened, the dots weren't just connecting, they were circling Megan's name like sharks. That weekend, I didn't touch wine. I didn't touch my inbox. I went for a walk instead, several actually. Long, aimless laps around the city. I passed bridal stores, dog parks, a man feeding pigeons with more dignity than my former director had ever shown. By Sunday night, the anxiety that had been buzzing in my chest had transformed into something else. Not confidence, exactly. More like alignment. The feeling of finally understanding where you are on the board. I wasn't the pawn Megan thought she sacrificed. I wasn't even a player she remembered existed. But someone had remembered me. And on Monday morning, I was going back in, not as an employee, but as a guest. An observer. A shadow tied to a trust with a name no one dared say anymore. My name wouldn't be in the agenda. I wouldn't have a seat card. But I'd be in that room. And something told me that by the end of the meeting, everyone would remember why I used to sit at the front. I walked back through the front doors like a ghost in business casual. Badge deactivated. Escort assigned. No small talk from the receptionist, just a half nod and a phone call to alert facilities that the guest from Legacy Holdings had arrived. You could practically hear the unspoken addendum. Don't ask questions. Just smile. The security guard assigned to me looked like he used to bounce at a dive bar, thick neck. Bluetooth earpiece, polite in that don't test me way. He didn't say much. Just led me through the glass atrium, past the same art installations and fake ferns I used to walk by every day without blinking. Now, every wall felt like it was watching. People noticed. Of course they did. Some coworkers glanced up, eyes darting from their monitors as I passed. One or two gave me a tight, nervous nod. Others avoided eye contact completely, like I was radioactive. A few even whispered to each other behind water bottles and whispered Slack messages. I didn't blame them. In an office that thrives on curated silence, my reappearance was like a grenade with the pin halfway out. When we reached the executive conference room, boardroom A, the holy inner sanctum of inflated titles and hermetically sealed egos, I was directed to a seat in the back. Not in the shadows, just close enough to feel like a chess piece they didn't remember placing on the board. The room was filled already. Department heads, client managers, Megan in a new blazer 2 sizes too small for her ambition. She sat near the front with her usual smug tilt, radiating premature victory. Then the lights dimmed. On the projector, a slide titled Client Confidence and Communication Integrity Timeline Overview. And there it was. My email, dated, time-stamped, highlighted in blue. Next to it, Megan's response. Same content, but 2 full business days later. Labeled version 2, highlighted in red, no commentary yet, just the cold timeline. A digital autopsy of who actually served the client and who nearly cost them. Megan shifted in her chair. The CEO adjusted his tie like it was trying to strangle him. Then the door opened, and in walked a man in a navy suit and wire-rimmed glasses, holding a leather binder thicker than an HR policy manual. No introduction, no handshakes. He walked straight to the front of the room, clicked a remote, and flipped to the next slide. A name appeared on the screen. Evan Halstead, General Counsel Client F. He looked up briefly, adjusted his mic, and began speaking in a voice so calm it somehow made everyone sit straighter. My firm advised Client F on your contract renewal 3 years ago, he said. Some of you may recall the founder's involvement at that time. Murmurs, fidgeting. Megan crossed her arms so tightly you'd think she was holding herself together. We've reviewed recent communication regarding the renewal pricing and compliance module clarification. The email in question, this one, he gestured toward my blue highlighted message, was received in accordance with all requested deadlines. He clicked again. A legal document filled the screen. Paragraphs, footnotes, highlighted text, a scanned signature at the bottom. This is the master service agreement last amended in Q2, 3 fiscal years ago. Included within that document is a clause rarely invoked but still active. Reversion Clause 47A, that got everyone's attention. You could feel the shift. A quiet collective wait, what? Halstead didn't pause. He was a scalpel, not a hammer. Clause 47A grants account oversight reversion to the founder's holding trust should the client experience administrative obstruction or receive materially delayed responses during critical communication periods. He flipped to the next slide, my email again. This response was timely, accurate, and satisfied every condition of Clause 47A's protection requirements. Click, Megan's email, red highlight. This response, however, was not only delayed, but created a compliance gray zone. Client FTCS Audit Department flagged the discrepancy, which is why I'm here. A silence rolled through the room like fog, the kind that makes you feel your own heartbeat in your ears. He stepped back from the screen and folded his hands. You may think this is about tone, or alignment, or internal processes. It's not, it's about service. And right now, your service is in breach of your own founder's legacy. I didn't move, didn't blink. Just sat there, spine straight, watching Megan's face try to figure out if it was melting or freezing. She opened her mouth once, but Halstead's eyes flicked toward her like a switchblade. Let me be clear, he said, voice clipped. Clause 47A doesn't suggest consequences, it enforces them, automatically. The CEO cleared his throat but said nothing. That's when I felt it, that cold clarity settle in. The room wasn't confused anymore, they were afraid. Not of me, of what I represented. The claws, the founder. The truth they buried under PowerPoints and process sermons. The truth was back, and it had a name. The general counsel flipped to a final page. No dramatic pause, no theater, just a methodical gesture, like a doctor preparing to explain how the disease spread. This, he said, tapping the screen with the remote, is Clause 47A, subsection B. The language is specific. He began to read. In the event that Client F experiences material obstruction, lapse, or significant delay in contractual or compliance-related communication, and said obstruction results in a failure to meet predefined response thresholds, operational control of the account shall revert to legacy holdings, herein defined as the founder's transitional trust. You could have heard a paperclip fall. He continued. Such a trigger may be activated without direct application if a communication lapse is objectively remedied by a non-authorized liaison who fulfills the contractual request on time, prior to formal leadership response. In such a case, the trust may reassign liaison duties accordingly. My ears rang. Non-authorized liaison. Me. Remedied. Me. I sat there frozen, staring at the screen while everyone else slowly began to realize what was happening. The CEO looked like he was trying to disappear into his own neck. The head of client ops fidgeted with her pen like she was rewinding her whole week. Megan didn't move. Her eyes were locked on Halstead like she was daring him to say what she already knew was coming. He said it anyway. Your company's delayed formal response, submitted on Tuesday at 11:14 a.m. by Director Megan Roswell, was in breach of the SLA. He clicked again. New slide. Her employee Amanda Fields, and he actually gestured toward me now, responded within SLA terms at 4:52 p.m. the previous Friday. Her message was acknowledged and accepted by our compliance team. Megan's chair creaked. I didn't look at her. In accordance with Clause 47A, Halstead said, closing the binder with a definitive thud, control of the Client F account reverts to legacy holdings as of 9:00 a.m. this morning. All access credentials related to this client have already been transferred. The air left the room. People weren't breathing. They were holding their breath like a wave had just frozen mid-crash and no one knew whether to duck or drown. And he added, as if that wasn't enough, in anticipation of this clause being triggered, the founder appointed a transitional liaison to represent the trust until full alignment is reestablished. He turned his eyes to me, not condescending, not even triumphant, just acknowledging Amanda Fields. Every muscle in my body locked up. Wait, what? I looked around the room expecting someone to laugh or object or shout that's not how this works, but no one did, they just sat there. Eyes flicking between me and Halstead like I'd sprouted horns or a crown or both. Even Megan didn't say anything. Her mouth was slightly open, but no sound came out, just a faint tremble in her jaw. She looked at me like I'd reached across the table and pulled the carpet from under her promotion speech. I'd spent the last week feeling erased, burned out of existence for the crime of caring too much about a deadline, for responding too fast, for not groveling to the Slack gods before doing what needed to be done. And now, that same email, the one they used to end me, was the match that lit their whole narrative on fire. Halstead stepped away from the podium, handed a sealed envelope to the CEO, and said, "This contains the formal notice. Legal counsel from our side has already reviewed it. You'll find all documentation in order." Then he turned back to me and gave the smallest nod, like a passing of the torch no one else could touch. "I'll remain available for any follow-up questions. But as of now, Miss Fields has the authority to attend all further communications regarding the account." And just like that, I wasn't a ghost anymore. I was the storm they tried to bury in a poster. The storm they accidentally fed with their own arrogance. I sat up straighter, not smug, not vengeful, just steady. Let them scramble, let them whisper. I had work to do. The company lawyer, a man named David, who always looked like he was born inside a red-lined contract, sat stiff-backed in the corner, flipping through a digital copy of the clause like he was hoping it would vanish if he blinked hard enough. His face had gone from its usual polished beige to the color of cold dishwater. By page 3, his fingers had stopped scrolling. "I can confirm," he said, voice brittle. "Clause 47A is active. Language is intact. There are no expiration conditions tied to founder retirement. The clause is binding." He didn't look up. He couldn't. The CEO. Gregory, call me Greg Holt, the kind of man who wore optimism like cologne and refused to believe in consequences, finally spoke. "Wait," Greg stammered, forcing a chuckle that died halfway out of his throat. "Wait a second, this can't possibly be you're saying we lost the account?" Over an email, his voice cracked on the last word, like it hurt to even say it. Halstead, the GC, didn't blink. "I'm saying you lost operational control, which includes strategy oversight, user data access, pricing governance, and exclusivity protections." Yes, Megan finally snapped out of her stunned silence. She wasn't supposed to email them. She barked, gesturing toward me like I was a virus that had escaped containment. "She's not leadership. That email never should have been sent without my review." Halstead's eyes sharpened. The temperature in the room dropped 5 degrees. And yet, he said slowly, deliberately, it was the only email that met the timeline, the only response that prevented a formal SLA breach, the only message your client considered actionable, which means, he stepped forward, voice cutting through the boardroom like a scalpel. That email just cost your company 18% of its annual revenue. It also invalidates your exclusivity protections with Client F for the next contract cycle. Gasps. Actual, audible gasps from people who hadn't said a word all meeting. The director of ops went white. The VP of sales looked like someone had sucker punched him in the liver. Megan stood frozen, blinking rapidly, still trying to push a narrative that had already collapsed under its own stupidity. I didn't say a word, didn't need to. My name hadn't been spoken aloud yet, but it was everywhere, in every glance, every stunned silence, every panicked exhale. Halstead turned back to the projector and clicked once more. A final slide appeared. Legacy reinstated founder directive, Gregory Carter effective immediately. Underneath it, another name. Mine. Amanda Fields transitional liaison, trust appointee temporary. Greg, the CEO, reached for his water glass like it might save him. His hand shook. The company lawyer was now just staring at the floor. And Megan? Megan looked like she wanted to crawl out of her own skin. Her mouth opened and closed. Nothing came out. Just the sound of a carefully constructed power structure caving in on itself. And I, who'd been erased from Slack, stripped of my badge, paraded on a breakroom poster like a corporate cautionary tale, just sat there. Still, unblinking, because this wasn't vindication by volume. It wasn't revenge via outburst. This was justice in its purest, coldest form, facts in sequence. Truth too undeniable to spin. Process collapsing under the weight of its own hypocrisy. And when the founder's name came back on that screen, already reactivated, already moving, it wasn't just a contract clause coming to life. It was a reckoning. A reckoning Megan had signed off on without even realizing it, and I was done being quiet. There was a brief flicker of movement near the glass doors, silent but unmistakable. 2 members of the corporate security team entered the room, dressed in suits. Not uniforms, they positioned themselves near the back wall like artwork that could move if necessary. No one spoke. The air folded in on itself. The CEO glanced at them, then at Halstead. No questions, no protest, just a slight lowering of his shoulders, the defeated slump of a man who knew what it meant when the founder's name reappeared on the masthead. The company lawyer, David, finally looked up from his lap, face drawn and pale like he'd just translated his own professional obituary. He scanned the room, then settled his eyes on me. "You're Amanda Fields?" he asked, already knowing the answer. I nodded. He inhaled once, slow and shallow. "Please remain. The trust requires your presence for the transition protocol." You could feel the atoms rearranging themselves. The term transition protocol doesn't mean much to the uninitiated. But to anyone in that room who'd ever worked a merger, a restructuring, or even a hostile takeover, it was the phrase that meant this is no longer your meeting. Megan shifted in her chair, then stood, slowly, like someone bracing for impact. The chair at the head of the table, the one Megan had occupied like a throne since the day she slithered into leadership, was suddenly empty. Still warm, still pointed at the projector, still framed by the giant frosted window that made everything behind it look like an empty cathedral. I stood, quietly, walked the perimeter of the table. No one said a word, no one dared, and then I sat, at the head. A few people blinked like they weren't sure what reality they'd just stepped into. The director of finance lowered her eyes. The client success lead gave the tiniest, blink and you'll miss it smile. One of the marketing managers actually whispered, "Holy shit," under her breath. Megan didn't sit back down. She hovered awkwardly near her abandoned seat, then slowly stepped aside, trying to melt into the wall. She'd built her kingdom on perception, delegation, and synthetic poise. And now that her grip on the narrative had slipped, there was nothing left holding her up but air. Halstead took his seat again, folded his hands. "The founder will join remotely in the next segment," he said. "But before that, let's be clear about the scope of the transition." He gestured toward the screen. A new slide appeared, this one not crafted by marketing or sanitized by HR. Just plain black text on white background. Phase 1, client reassignment and operational freeze. Phase 2, ethics review retaliatory actions post-clause trigger. Phase 3, liaison directive implementation. My name was right there under Phase 3. Amanda Fields appointee. Temporary operational liaison. There was no applause. No confetti, just the quiet acknowledgement of gravity finally shifting. For the first time in a week I exhaled. Not from relief, from alignment, because everything Megan had tried to bury me under, policy, protocol, silence, was now collapsing around her. She didn't look angry anymore. She looked small. She looked miscalculated. I scanned the room, not out of pride, but inventory. People who used to ignore me during stand-ups. People who borrowed my work and gave credit to her. People who smirked when I was walked out like a criminal. Some looked ashamed. Others tried to disappear into their laptops. But a few watched me with something else, recognition. Not fear, not awe, just awareness. The quiet understanding that they'd seen something rare, a fall and a rise all in one week, and I gave them nothing. No smile, no smirk. No I told you so, just the steady posture of someone who didn't need revenge to taste sweet. Just needed it to be witnessed. I folded my hands, leaned back, looked forward, let the founder speak. Let Megan sweat. Let every laminated HR poster turn to ash in the face of the one thing they couldn't control, truth delivered on time. The screen flickered, then steadied. A familiar face appeared, older than his last headshot, hair grayer, jaw more sunken but gaze still sharp enough to pierce granite. Gregory Carter, founder, former CEO, and now the invisible architect of this reckoning, stared back at the room with the kind of calm that only comes from knowing you built the walls and still own the blueprints. "Good afternoon," he said, voice unhurried, confident in its own gravity. "I'll keep this brief." You could hear the room hold its collective breath. I was notified early this week that Clause 47A was triggered, not by legal loopholes, not by drama, but by service, actual service. He paused, then turned his eyes, digitally but unmistakably, toward me. "Amanda Fields," he said, and every syllable landed like a gavel. "Thank you. You didn't just honor the client, you honored this company's original purpose. I trusted that clause would only ever activate for someone worth the seat. Worth the seat." I felt something shift in my chest, not pride, not vindication, something deeper, like a part of me that had been gnawed hollow by years of being overlooked was finally filled. Quietly, completely. Greg's gaze returned to the rest of the room. What followed after her service, he continued, is where things became disappointing. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Let me be absolutely clear," he said. "Any executive who retaliated against Miss Fields, formally or informally, will be subject to immediate review for ethical violations. That process begins today." Silence, thick and wet like the moment before a thunderclap. Greg gave a single nod to someone off-screen, then the feed cut. No goodbyes, no motivational platitudes, just truth, delivered clean. Security moved, not fast, not slow, just with certainty. They stepped toward the wall, toward Megan, who had already started inching toward the door like maybe, just maybe, she could slip away before anyone said the word investigation. She didn't make it. One of the security officers leaned in close, gentle, but firm. Megan stood, shaking, her eyes darting toward the CEO, toward David, toward anyone who might save her. No one moved. She turned to me for the first time since this began. No words, just that final, pathetic look of a person who'd finally seen their name come loose from the brass plaque they thought it would live on forever. I didn't smile, I didn't nod, I just looked past her. The projector screen flickered once more, a new slide. Plain black and white, trust reinstated, client retained, revenue secured, that was it. No balloons, no cake, just the surgical undoing of a week's worth of lies. The room didn't erupt. It exhaled, a long, tension-drained sigh of a company that had just dodged the very bullet it had loaded itself. A notification pinged on someone's laptop, then another, and then my own phone buzzed an internal systems message. "Access reinstated, Amanda Fields, operational liaison, trust appointee." I tapped it once, just to make sure it wasn't some glitch in the matrix. But it was real. My name, back in the system. Not as an assistant, not as someone's underling, but as a decision maker. I looked around the room one last time. Not to gloat, just to absorb. Every glance that had once skipped over me now paused. Every face that had once looked through me now looked to me, and still I said nothing. Because the loudest sound in that room wasn't Megan's exit, it wasn't the founder's speech. It wasn't the rustling of papers or the shuffle of suits. It was the sound of a woman, wrongfully erased, taking her seat without asking for it back. Quietly. Permanently. Yeah. Big thanks for watching, you sneaky seniors. Subscribe to keep the coffee pot brewing revenge. Your ex-colleagues won't know what hit 'em.